Hey everyone, Kris here. Just a quick note before we get started. This is episode 100, and at about 500,000 downloads at this point, I am extremely grateful to all of you for the support that you've given, for the people who've become patrons, and for the people who have shared this around. Thank you so much. I definitely ask that you continue sharing it. We want to keep going with this thing. We want to grow it even bigger. So please keep sharing. As a little bit of celebration for episode 100, we've got for the next 10 days, 20% off of any of the physical products on our website. We're definitely low on some stock, but anything that's left over is 20% off, as well as our ebooks. Those are also 20% off. You can use the code episode 100. That's 100 the number. Episode 100 for 20% off at powercompanyclimbing.com. Also, this episode is a little bit different. We flipped the script. Nate is sitting in the host chair for this one, talking to me. And it's a tough job. I think you'll see that in the very beginning of this episode, but Nate falls into it nicely. So again, thank you very much. I appreciate all of your support.
Maybe you don't know.
And I would always be like, look, kid, you are never, ever, ever going to outwork me, period. It will not happen.
This time, power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time to build power.
What's up, everybody? This is your host, Nate Drolet, and you're listening to Power Company Climbing Podcast, brought to you by powercompanyclimbing.com. And yes, I'm your host today. So today's going to be a special episode. I'm going to be sitting down and interviewing my co-host, Kris Hampton, and we're going to talk about a couple different things.
Why, when you said my name, did the sirens go off outside?
Oh,
That was horrible.
yeah. So, Kris, what are we going to talk about today?
I don't know, man. You're the host.
Oh, that's right. The pressure's on me now.
You got to tell me. I don't know anything about it.
As host, Nathan Drolet, I think I'm going to host this podcast through
Telekinesis.
So let's talk. We're going to talk about kind of your journey through having been a weekend warrior for a long time, and that's how this, Power Company started. Started as a blog 9 years ago.
We keep upping that number. I don't actually know what it is. It's 8, I think.
Okay,
We'll say 8.
so it's coming up on a decade now, and
That's a better way to say it.
but yeah, you started this blog as a weekend warrior, as someone kind of digging into their own training themselves and trying to figure out what they were doing, and you wanted to share that information.
Yep, exactly.
And that ended up later becoming the business, the podcast, everything that is Power Company Climbing.
Yep.
So yeah, today I want to sit down and talk with you about your entire transition from having been a weekend warrior and very much like someone who's starting to dig into training and learn as much as they could on their own, to you ended up training other people, and now you're not a weekend warrior. Now you have...
Now I'm not a warrior at all.
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But things have definitely changed, and so I want to get your perspective on kind of how things have gone.
Okay. Yeah, where do we start?
At the beginning.
So I was born on October 5th.
At the beginning that people care about.
Yes.
What started... So, blog.
Okay.
What started it?
Well, I was like... I've told this story. I don't know if I've ever told it on the podcast, though. I told it in a climbing magazine article that I had been a trad climber. I had made a name for myself in trad climbing, specifically off-width climbing, God forbid. And I had quit climbing for a while because I just got bored of the red, which sounds insane now, but I got bored of the red because I'd basically run out of any trad climbs that I could do within any short window, without long-term projecting something, which was not my method. And while I had quit climbing, one of my climbing mentors, John Bernal, said in a public forum online that he didn't think that I was an overachiever, which is how I guess I portrayed myself because I was a cocky little bastard. He said, I don't think Kris is an overachiever. I think he's an underachiever. I think he does just enough to get noticed, and then he disappears. And I was like, motherfucker, he's right. And then shortly after, John died while climbing, had a heart attack while he was climbing in the red. And at that point, I was like, what can I do to honor his memory? And the best I could come up with was really give this thing a shot, see how good you can become. So I started really thinking about training and how to become better, and I wanted to document that process. So after, I don't know, maybe a year of trying to become a better climber, I started documenting it and using myself as a guinea pig, So that's where the blog started. And I got really lucky with the logo. It was my first attempt at any kind of logo.
Yeah, it's still hard to believe.
So
it's funny when you showed me, you're like, oh yeah, this is because you have the cruisers that you stenciled it on.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, this
drew
is just
it with a Sharpie on there.
This is first draft, first I ever tried. And I was like, well, that's what it is now.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first thing I ever did was the logo just happened. The name just happened. And yeah, went from there.
So, I mean, yeah, you like jumping into the training space.
There wasn't even a training space.
You're right.
There was nothing at the time. Like, there was Dave McLeod.
Mm-hmm.
He was around for sure. There would be articles in the magazines. There'd be Neil Gresham articles now and then. Eric Hurst was for sure the biggest name in training.
Mm-hmm.
And like Performance Rock Climbing had been written. The Self-Coach Climber had been written. So those were all big influences on me. And I read all of their books, all of their articles, all of everything. I had a huge collection of climbing and rock and ice magazines that I had so voraciously consumed over the years that I had them memorized by what color the spine was. I knew which articles were inside. So I remember going when I decided I was going to train and become better, I remember going through all of those magazines, just looking at the spines of them and pulling out the ones I knew had training articles I wanted to read. And I read those over and over and over, along with all the Hurst books and Dave McLeod's blog.
Was there anything in particular that you felt that you could really contribute? Or was this just kind of your own?
That's a good question. Dave McLeod's blog he sort of used himself as a guinea pig now and then, and talked about his experience. And I appreciated that. And then reading Performance Rock Climbing from Dale Goddard and Udo Newman.
Oh, super classic.
Yeah, mega classic. I actually stole my copy from the Cincinnati Library. I checked it out and then told him I lost it. So I ended up paying for it. So I bought it basically for really cheap. But they use a character in the book who is having these experiences while training, and they use him as a vehicle for saying, here's how you should train. And I thought that was really interesting and thought, why don't I just do that myself? I had a bit of a name already from Off With Climbing and then from rapping about climbing. And people were already, as soon as I started the blog, people were reading it. And people loved the logo and people were really latching on. I had a few friends who were really instrumental in making me feel confident in going forward. Like my friend Justin Riddell was huge at the time for me. My friend Lee Smith. Those guys really were pushing me to put this stuff out there. And their appetite for it was big enough that I felt like, sweet, I know these two dudes are going to read it. So
It's still worth it,
I'll
even if it
write
was just them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
No, that's awesome.
Now I'm like, if 25,000 people don't read this article, then screw it.
Burning the website down. Right on. So when you got back into sport climbing, so that's what kind of when this all started. You were like, okay.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely didn't go back to the red and be like, oh, I'm going to start projecting those trad routes. I discovered sport climbing, and it was like a whole new universe opened up.
Yeah, you made the right decision.
Yeah, I did. You're right.
At that time, was there an end goal? So this was, because this was quite a while ago. This was about the time that I feel like I first started bumping into you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I pretty quickly, so the initial goal was actually just to move up the leaderboard on redriverclimbing.com. Like that was it. I had no big number goals, nothing like that. And as I was moving up really quickly through those ranks, at the time, my climbing partner was a girl named Rachel Goldman, and we were really into climbing as many pitches as we could, as fast as we could, So we'd have like 25 pitch days in the red, where we'd be at 4 or 5 different crags, climbing 15 or 25 11s and a handful of 510s, because that's what got you up the scoreboard the fastest. and that was really fun, and it helped me build up a really solid base of stamina and just of knowledge on rock.
Mm-hmm.
And and I decided that 512 was like where I wanted to climb. So I trained really hard, all endurance, 100% endurance training for that year. And I remember the first time I went into the gym. Here's why I went straight to endurance training, because I remember the first time I went into the gym very, very distinctly. I can tell you the wall, I can tell you where the move was, and I can tell you what the move was. I could reset it right now. It was a 10 plus, and I was so pumped at the 3/4 mark on this route that I couldn't do this move on a 10 plus. I was a 512 plus, 13 minus crack climber. People knew my name because I was in the guidebooks. Here I come into the gym and I'm getting fucking destroyed on this 10 plus.
Mm-hmm.
So at that moment, I made it my mission. I'm never getting pumped again, ever, So I started doing lap after lap after lap. I remember the day that I did my first double lap on a mid 11 in the gym. I remember the route. I could probably write the moves down. And so I thought 512 was the place, and trained really hard, went out, tried my first 512s, and did 5 of them in the same weekend. So I realized that at that point that I was there. Like, okay, I can climb 512. I need a bigger goal. 513, was the next number. So that became my goal. So that I would say that was the big driving force the first few years of the blog was 513. First couple of years, because I spent so much time building up a base of 511 and 512. I did 70 512s that year.
The first year of climbing 512, you did 70?
Did 70.
Before climbing 513?
Yep. Did 70 512s before I touched a 513.
That's a way to do it.
It was a slow way to do it.
Yeah.
I feel like now.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a way to do it, and it worked well.
Yeah. So as things kind of kept going with, you kept climbing, kept endurance going, were there any big shifts for you as far as, obviously like you just trained endurance forever, kept doing that until it kind of stopped working, but even just beyond, physical training, was there a time when climbing started to take like a different meaning for you, or even just trying hard?
Yeah, on a few different levels, for sure. Even when I was just doing the laps, like the tons of 511 and then tons of 512, those I was really dedicated to climbing. But as I get into harder grades and as I learn to project, it became a whole different type of dedication where the entire week was checking the weather, planning the partners to be at that crag, planning my week's training around maximizing the weekend. So when I was doing all those laps, all that stamina, all that endurance, I was just training endurance through the season. I mean, going out and doing 30, 40, 511s and a handful of 512s in a weekend was exactly what I was doing in the gym on Tuesday and Thursday. So I didn't need to prioritize it. It was just what I did. When it became you're training in the gym and you're performing outside at a higher level and doing a different thing, projecting something really difficult, then I had to learn to shift my week and really prioritize for being prepared for the weekend. I think that was the biggest lesson I learned probably in that first few years of the blog and being my own guinea pig and learning to climb harder, was that volume that I was doing couldn't continue if I wanted to continue to make progress.
You couldn't keep scaling up.
Right. And volume. As soon as I switched what I was doing outside on the weekends, my week had to switch as well. Couldn't be the same, go in and do 1 million laps on Tuesday and Thursday and still be ready for the weekend.
Mm-hmm. So when you started climbing, that was, trad climbing, very ethics driven.
Yeah. I was an ethical midget.
And it gets to a point to where when you're, years down the road, many years down the road, you're living in Cincinnati, your goal is to climb 13 plus, and you're writing a blog about the orange boulder that simulates a boulder across the country that you've never actually seen.
Yep.
That's quite a jump.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of massive. However, the origin of my climbing was in the gym and was with sport climbers and boulders. And the gym I started in, Climb Time, is a really great bouldering gym and always was. Even though I started top roping they had a giant 45, and we would end up spending a lot of time on that 45, and the bouldering sessions with that crew in there, with my friends, Chris Eklund and Josh Dees and Jeremy Dees and Ray Ellington came in around that time, and there was just a really great crew of stoke in there and support, huge support. So it really was a transfer back to my roots, even before trad climbing. I was definitely a gym climber, and I was very interested in difficulty in the gym. And then I got bromanced by this fucking trad climbing that I thought was the way. And like I said, I was a total ethical midget. I just fell into this trap of, trad climbers have it right, and fuck bolts,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think it's something that I think a lot of people can miss out on, and I think you did a really good job of it, is, so you climbed at the Red. The Red is, it's good in the spring and the fall. If you don't really care about conditions, you can climb in the summer, but it's really heinous.
it's heinous.
And, especially like at certain grades, you can get away with climbing in the summer. But at a certain point too, if you try and climb through the whole summer, you just get burnt out. By the time the weather gets good, you're over it. You're exhausted. You've been trying hard for too long. It's a classic cycle. So, you have to turn to the climbing gym. And it's, I think something that does get missed is, what I think you have done a good job with, and something that you documented really well, is like, you got psyched about the climbing gym. Like, you were actually, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm here to train, I'm here to get stronger because I'm here for climbing outside. And you were like, okay, well, this is what at least this is how it appeared. It seemed like you were like, hey, like, if I'm going to spend the next few months here, like, I should be really passionate about what I do.
Yeah. I mean, it was a necessary evil. I knew I had to do it, and I knew that if I hated it, I wasn't going to do it. So I went back to those, in my head, I went back to those early sessions of, the whole crew on the climb time 45 for hours, everybody trying really hard. I went back to that, and I took a look around the gym and was like, yeah, that's not really happening anymore. And so I had to create it. It took a lot of work and a lot of convincing. Whether they knew they were being convinced or not, I don't know. But there was some struggle to get people excited to train and excited to posse up and try hard together. Partly because the gym I went back to was RockQuest, and it was mostly a sport climbing gym. The bouldering area was terrible at the time. They've since built a much better boulder, a big 360 degree top out boulder, which is really nice. But early on, that environment didn't exist. So I knew I had to create it, and that required me to change my entire gym personality, because I was an asshole in the gym. I just wouldn't talk to people. I was there to work. I was there for a reason. If you talked to me, I would answer you, and then I would go back to my business, and I would not engage without being spoken to first. I was there to do my business, and that definitely caused some issues with some people. But I had to change that. I had to get partners to train with, to get partners to go to the Red with, to get people stoked on going to the same cliff over and over and over, or to belay me for 45 fucking minutes at a time, I would have to become a person who wanted to share. And the blog helped facilitate that. And it was part of the necessary evil. So I really fully embraced
Making friends
gym
was
climbing.
part of the necessary evil.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I didn't want climber friends. Like, I didn't want to date climbers. I didn't want climber friends. I just wanted to climb hard. But I had to embrace it more than I had been. And I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I made that switch. But early on, it was tough. It was a tough switch to make. Because I was a dick. Straight up.
And psyched on it too.
Yeah, I was stoked on being a dick. I was proud of my assholeness. So I've pretty radically changed, and in no small part, my fiance played a very large part in that, because she's the friendliest person at the gym, and she's the person everyone wants to talk to. And I can't tell you how many times we would walk into the gym and I would be in there, I would be warmed up, I would be halfway through my session, and she'd finally make it out of the lobby because she stopped and talked to everyone. And I'd be like, oh my God, how did I get myself into this? But it turned out to be a really great thing.
Oh man. I was just thinking something. So, kind of touch on the weekend warrior aspect.
Yeah.
So, for 18 years, you'd painted murals?
Yeah. 18 or 19. Yeah.
And that's physical work. Like
Totally. Very physical.
Physical, a lot of overhead work.
Yep.
When you started training harder and harder, like, was there ever a time where you had thought like, oh, I'm never going to be able to get past 13 minus because I have a physical job, like I have to work a bunch. Like, do you ever have those kind of thoughts?
Nope. No. I think that I think I'm blessed to
#blessed
to have an attitude such that I don't do well with excuses, whether they're coming from me or from someone else. I'm pretty quick to say to myself, that was a fucking cop-out, dude. Get your shit together. I'm pretty quick to say that to myself. And so I think by that point in my life, it would never even enter my head that there's no way I can climb 13 plus. I had some doubts about 514 maybe. Partly because it was a mythical grade when I started climbing. Like, there were only a handful in the country and only a handful of people climbing it. So I'm sure I had some doubts early on about it. But once I committed to it as a goal, I think those doubts disappeared, at least in large part. And I think that I knew early on that I was strong. I was physically strong. I knew that. And I knew I could become a better climber. I had heard for a long time that I was a pretty climber, that I climbed gracefully. But I knew there was more to it, especially after Kris came along, kind of flipped everybody's fucking idea of what climbing looked like on its head. I knew there was a lot more to climbing that I could learn. I still resisted learning some of those things for quite a while. But I always knew I could become better. So no, I don't think I was certainly never turned off by the idea that I had to work a full-time job. That just was what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no other option. I didn't grow up in a time of everybody had a fucking Sprinter van. I didn't know anybody who lived in a van. I didn't know anybody who just traveled and climbed. That didn't happen. All those guys that I grew up with learning from were all weekend warriors. If you were from Ohio, you were just a weekend warrior. Like that was what the paradigm was. So it never occurred to me that would stop me.
Right on. Do you think, in what aspects do you think being a weekend warrior helped your climbing?
Oh man.
Because
certainly more than they hurt it.
Yeah, because being a weekend warrior, a lot of people, it's very easy to glorify, if I could rock climb every single day and all this, I would be amazing overnight. But I think there's a give and take with everything.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the things that you benefited from?
Oh man, this is an exhaustive list. So I definitely feel like having a structured schedule was huge for my climbing. If I didn't have a job, I would have been at the climbing gym all the damn time, and I'd have gotten hurt, burnt out, something to that effect. Or I'd have just been climbing moderate climbs every single day because I didn't have enough to go hard.
Mm-hmm. Which, we see all the time.
Which you see all the time. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who, when they ask us like, hey, what's the best thing that I could do? I've got literally all the time in the world. Like I could dedicate 8 hours of every day to training. What should I do? Get
Rest.
a hobby.
Yeah. Get a hobby.
Yeah.
Find something else you're passionate about.
So for you, the schedule was...
Yeah, the schedule, having that structured schedule was huge for me because I had to make the most of the time that I had. And that kept that fire lit under my ass to go harder, And talking more about that fire, there would be kids in the gym who were crushers. And they would be like, they would say something to taunt me because they knew that I would come back with something. And I would always be like, look, kid, you are never, ever, ever going to outwork me, period. It will not happen. You're going to grow up. You're going to burn out. I'm going to be working this hard still. So deal with that. And
this lesson's free. I charge for the rest.
So I knew I had a limited amount of time. I had a specific amount of time, and I had to make the most of it. So the schedule was huge. Knowing that I had a limited time outside to reach my goals was big because I can't drive 2.5 hours and then fuck around. I'm there to get shit done, So I go out and I fucking climb. I have a plan. I stick to the plan and I get shit done. And I think a lot of successful weekend warriors are that way, that they're focused. They know that Sunday night comes, they need to get home, they need to get sleep because they've got 40 hours of work coming up or more. They've got kids, they've got other hobbies, So that time at the Red or out at the Crag, whatever it is so precious and so important that you have no choice but to leave it all there. I would see those fuckers that worked at Miguel's every weekend And I would be like, "What'd you do this week?" "Oh, nothing really." I'd be like, "Really? What are you gonna do today?" "Oh, I'm probably just gonna roll up to the crag and heckle people." I'm like,
Go do some pitches, see
"You're
what
a
happens.
fucking waste."
You're fucking
Why waste that time? But it's because they had it available. You know, they had all the time in the world, and that was okay to them. And I just didn't have that. So it was, you got right now, do it right now.
Yeah. And it's, you know, that's a thing that's really hard to see. Like, and I honestly think, you know, you very much had a schedule of, you were like, hey, I've got Tuesday, I forget what it was, Tuesdays and Saturdays.
For the red?
Yeah.
Oh, that was way in the later years.
Way in later years.
It used to be, up until 13C, it was every other weekend.
Okay.
So I just had 4 days a month for about 5 months out of the year.
Yeah. And, you know, I think there's so much value in not having that kind of time. Like, you know, Dave McLeod has a chapter, I think it's titled in 9 out of 10 Climbers, it's Fear the Weekend Warrior.
Fear the Weekend Warrior, yeah, totally.
Yeah, because no one will be as tenacious. And it's the person who has the least amount of time that values it the most.
Absolutely.
And I know, like, I remember when I was working at Amazon, I was working between 50 and 60 hours every week, always walking every day, like close to 20 miles. Like, I never prioritized recovery as much as I did in that time.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
if I didn't get sleep, like, I would just crash, like, pretty much within 2-3 days. Like, there wasn't...
You couldn't just sleep in your van till 9 whenever you felt like it.
Yeah, like, there was no other option other than optimize everything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you know, it's hard to... I can now look back and I'm like, wow, you know, that time really sucked as far as, like, I had to spread myself really thin to get anything done. But I learned so much from those times.
Yeah. I think it's a really important thing to really plan, really prioritize, really optimize. I like that you use that word. Your time and your schedule, and to find partners who are interested in the same. I think that's really big. I had Yasmin, who is one of my closest friends and one of my oldest training partners. And we would start planning the following weekend. Even if we weren't climbing together, we would start talking to each other about our plans on Monday. You know, we'd tell each other what we did and then make plans for the next weekend. And if you wait until Saturday morning to talk about what you're going to do Saturday morning, you're not going to get shit done. That's just the way it goes.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah,
I don't care how productive you think you are in the last second. It's not going to continue every week.
Oh yeah.
You know, maybe you can pull it out of your ass once in a while, but if you don't plan it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Or you see this all the time. I'm just going to go there. I'll see how I feel and take it from there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have that option. Like, and Weekend Warriors don't have that option. If you don't feel good, so the fuck what? You don't get a rest day.
Yeah.
That's Saturday. You can't choose for Saturday to be a rest day. That's your day to climb. That's all you fucking get. So suck it up, Buttercup. You know, you got to go.
Yeah. I don't think it's tough because it does seem like such a barrier, but I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Let's talk training as a weekend warrior. You know, a lot of people think that if only they could train 30 hours a week.
Fuck, no way. No.
You know, so, I mean, when you were doing this, even like, let's say when you were trying to focus on climbing 514, like how many hours a week were you able to dedicate to training?
So at my most, and let me qualify this by saying that this was my 514 goal didn't happen until my daughter was in high school, had her own social life, was able to get around with her friends or on her own regularly enough that I didn't have to be the sole provider of rides, and that allowed me to put a little more time into getting outside, which meant I had to take time away from the training of it for the indoor, for the outdoor season. But for those training seasons, when I was doing my most, I would do 3 high intensity days a week. This is when I'm not climbing outside at all. This is during the summer or during the dead of winter. I would do 3 high intensity days a week. That would be approximately 2 to 3 hours, depending on whether I was lifting weights or something afterward. And then I would do one really low intensity workout that lasted about door to door, like gym door to gym door, probably about 40 minutes. So that was at the most that I was training.
Somewhere between like 7 and 10 hours a week.
Yep.
And that was at your peak?
Probably 10 would be at the most, 10 or 11, because some of that time I was hangboarding in the mornings. Like I would get up at 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. to hangboard before work. And then I would go to the gym in Boulder in the evenings 3 days a week, Tuesday, Thursday, usually Sunday. So, and Wednesdays was the low intensity day. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that was a struggle. Like getting that in was a struggle. Because
the 3 back to back.
Yep. Because Wednesday was Caitlin's day. That was my daughter. So she would come to the gym with me for those 40 minutes, right after I picked her up from school. Or she would get a ride home from school. I would go to the gym and we'd just meet at the house, something like that.
Do you feel like so having, done the Weekend Warrior, that whole process, do you feel like you would have been limited had you had to stay with that schedule?
If I had to stay with which schedule?
With what you're basically describing. Like, let's say you were still living in Cincinnati, climbing at the Red. Like, do you feel like the Weekend Warrior schedule, do you feel like they are drastically limited in their potential?
Yes, I do. But not because they're Weekend Warriors. Mostly because it's not really all that difficult to climb out a crag. Especially the like second tier routes that you can learn a lot from. Those are routes that you projected years ago and did. So you don't stand to gain as much from them now. And what you have left ends up becoming all mega projects, So I do think that being confined to one crag, even if that crag is as amazing as Red River Gorge is, it can still be pretty drastically limiting for a Weekend Warrior.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought of the geographic limitations of a Weekend Warrior. I was thinking more time, but I mean, that's a huge thing. Like,
yeah. I mean, for 19 years, I never had more than a 2-week vacation, and I foolishly spent it at Vitavu most of those years.
Foolishly.
No, I loved my time at Vitavu, but that's tough. If you've got 2 weeks to go climb somewhere else a year, and you can occasionally do the 3-day weekend down to Chattanooga or over to the New or something like that. but you don't get to go to Waco for a month. You don't get to go to Lander for the summer. Those things don't happen when you're full-time job, kids, responsibilities. So that is a limiting factor that I think we have to be cognizant of, and you have to plan for that. As sad as it is, you have to look at second tier routes ahead of time when they're top tier routes and say, I'm not going to project that 13B because it's my style. So down the road, I want to be able to try and onside it, or do it second go. So you have to hold that stuff back and then be able to pull the trigger on something that for years you've been going, no, I'm saving it for the onsite.
Oh, man.
And that's a scary proposition.
Yeah, it is.
I've never been on Bohica. Never. Because I was going to save it for a flash attempt. Mm-hmm. But then after I sent Transworld, I was like, fuck this cave.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So I feel like I missed out a little bit. But I think had I had more options instead of just Bohica, because that was really the only thing I had left that I can think of. Had I had more options, I wouldn't feel like I missed out. Had I been smarter early on.
Mm-hmm. No, okay, that's a good answer. Yeah, I hadn't even thought geographically. So time-wise, like let's say you live somewhere like the Frankenjura, where just A, B, and up everywhere you can turn.
Yep.
And,
so I've got unlimited options, basically.
Unlimited options. I hear they're only like 50-foot rock climbs, so you don't even need endurance. Yeah, so if you had unlimited options, do you still feel like Weekend Warrior would be quite as limited?
I think there are some limitations, but I don't think they're limited by their training, or their available time for training. And obviously, everyone's got a different situation. If you're a Weekend Warrior who's also got 7 children from 16 to 2, that's a lot more difficult than what I did. A shitload more difficult than what I did. So in the general sense of things, if you have a good gym or a good home gym, a good home wall, and you are dedicated to the process and willing to put the work in, I don't think that you will be limited by your training. Where I do think the limitations can come in are having the time for working on a project simply because working on a project only on weekends is a lot different proposition than being able to work on the moves, take a rest day, and then come back. Projecting for a Weekend Warrior is pretty difficult simply because day 2, if you have 2 days in a row and that's your only option, day 2 can be pretty rough if you're working on something really hard, especially if you're getting close.
Yeah.
Where you're putting in really hard burns on day 1. Day 2 can be tough. Or you have to go easier on day 1 so that day 2 is good. It's always a juggling act, man. And that type of projecting where you can come back after a rest day is massively different than the way a Weekend Warrior has to project. So I do think that's a limitation. I think if you're a Weekend Warrior who lives somewhere like Lander, where you could sneak up after work to do a few burns, then there aren't any limitations unless you have a really physical job. I mean, look at BJ Tilden. He's got a full-time job. He's got a family. He's got a wife who is super badass in her own right and has been on the podcast. And she needs time to do her things too. So not only does he have to be present for this relationship, he also has to be dad to Wyatt while Emily's out doing her thing. And the thing that Steve Bechtel and I have talked about this, and the thing that makes BJ so good at what he does is he rests hard. Like he rests when he needs to, and he's very aware of, I need to rest right now because work was hard, being dad was hard. I want to go hard on the project in 2 days, so I need to rest. You know? So I don't think there are limitations if you live near a crag. I think there are mega project limitations if you are a weekend warrior in the truest sense of the word. But can you get strong enough to climb dream routes? For sure, no question. I think you have a better chance than the full-time climbers, frankly, of getting strong enough.
Cool. Let's talk about that, because I think that's a good place to take this. So your schedule's obviously changed in the last few years, since for better or for worse.
Jesus Christ, I don't even know what to say.
It's very different.
I'm refining it still.
Yeah, yes. But you've had opportunities that you didn't have before. Like there were times where you got to go to the south, you got to climb at like Rocktown, Little Rock City, all those places for about a month straight, and you got to
I only climbed at Rocktown on one boulder.
I was about to say you got to just climb on one boulder for like a month straight. I tried to throw you a bone there, but
no, I actually did some cool dynos.
Okay.
Other than that boulder, that was all I did really.
Okay. But then you got to take a long trip to Waco.
Yeah, totally.
But in your schedule, while being very different, it's a lot to acclimatize to. I mean, now you have a training wall in your home.
Yeah,
that you've built.
That I hurt myself on.
The new, I've heard BJ Tilden called it the best crag and lander.
It's the best crag and lander.
Yeah,
no question. Yeah.
That you hurt yourself on. Yes. So now, I mean, this is very different from
very different.
Being incredibly limited and having to say, okay, I have these 40 minutes that I can carve out of Wednesday. Like, I need to use those 40 minutes perfectly. This is, you can kind of divide up your time a little bit differently. So how has that changed things?
I'll start by sort of explaining the initial switch when I essentially was a full-time rock climber for 9 months. And I carried some things over that I think were really important, but I also made some really key mistakes. Rock climbing makes you weak.
Facts.
Period. Training makes you strong. Rock climbing makes you weak. That may sound really ridiculous if you think about someone like, Kris Sharma, who doesn't train, so to speak, got really strong just through rock climbing. But we don't have anything to compare that to. We don't know what that might look like if Kris Sharma were to train in a systematic way.
And also, just to point out, Sharma would be survivorship bias.
Totally.
Something we'll be discussing on another podcast.
Yes. And so we can take all these examples of people who got strong through rock climbing, but we have no comparison for what their true strength could look like. for me, I know that when I'm training regularly, I'm considerably stronger than when I just go rock climbing, because I know what happens at the end of every Red River climbing season, and I go back into the gym, I can't climb V5. Then by the end of the training season, I'm climbing V8s and V9s again pretty regularly. Then I go out, I have a good season. By the end of the season, I can't climb V5. That's the way it happened every year. Those numbers would go up very slightly every year, which let me know those were kind of my baseline, like my measurements. This is how I know I'm getting better every year. Had less to do with what did I send outside, more to do with what level do I fall back to when I come back to the gym. And so that's in a 3-month, 2.5-month climbing season. If I'm outside for 9 months, then where do I fall to? I didn't know. I spent a month, like we just talked about, climbing on one boulder that was lightly overhanging, slopey, odd compression, balance, strange,
not powerful,
strange boulder. And then I tried to go to Waco. And that was a mistake. I approached the Chattanooga side of that, climbing on Golden Harvest, like I would a normal climbing season. And I have no regrets whatsoever about that part of the trip. But I didn't plan beyond that, because I was coming from the red, trying all the short bouldery routes that I hadn't done. So to keep my bouldering strength high, went to Chattanooga, felt like I had a shot, got sucked into it, didn't do it, didn't plan beyond that, because I was trying to perform in Chattanooga.
Mm-hmm.
And that screwed things up. So Waco was a bit of a struggle. I had a really amazing time because it was my first trip there. I finally kind of found my rhythm there and climbed something that was hard for me. So I realized that I had made this mistake in treating full-time climbing like weekend warrioring. It's not the same thing at all. Then I got immediately thrust into this new life. I thrust myself into this new life. I shouldn't say it like it just happened because the cosmos deemed it so. But now I have all the time in the world to go climbing if I want to. I have no one to answer to. My daughter lives in Indiana. My responsibilities can be fulfilled when I want them to, essentially. If I don't want to work that day, I don't have to work that day. However, here's the trick. Here's the thing I'm struggling with now, is that I've become addicted to this podcast shit. So I want to do it all the time. The business is taking off, so I'm really focusing on it. And I end up not going rock climbing, So in reality, I think the weekend warrior work for someone else model was far better for my rock climbing than this run my own business, I could take any day off I want schedule. I haven't figured this part out yet. Yeah. I think I can. I think I have the ability to. And just so everybody listening knows the situation, my fiance is finishing her master's degree, so she's not working, or not in a paid position. She's working at a school outside of Lander as her field placement. So right now, the power company is paying all of the bills for the new house and the machine shop that we just built, and also employing Nate and the new office manager and Blake and Paul to a small degree, even though he's got his own gym, Crux Conditioning. And that feels like a massive responsibility to me. So I just decided that's going to be my focus until Annalise is done with school. And then I will reevaluate my rock climbing schedule and try to prioritize that again. And I think that's something that everyone has to do at some point in their life, is kind of prioritize something other than rock climbing. And I'm glad that I have the weekend warrior background and ethic to be able to flip that switch when I need it, you know? And I think the switch will be just as easy to flip when the time is right to flip it back the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have an answer for how to do it with this level of responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm still struggling through it.
I mean, it's tough. You know, it's different too.
How does it work for you, being able to pretty much climb any day and living in your van the large majority of the year?
Honestly, it is harder for me still than when I was like, because my schedule used to be, I would just find a job, work all the overtime that anyone would offer to pay me. And I typically would have at least 2 jobs going at a time.
I'm not paying you overtime.
No, of course not. But, you know, so I'd typically find it normally like 2 jobs, just work as much as possible. Do that for about 9 months. And then I would take typically like 2 1.5 month breaks a year, which is awesome. You know, it's just like work super hard and then climb hard afterwards. And for me, it was, you know, it's a nice setup because it was, I mean, all the structure was already built in.
Right.
So I didn't really have to think about too much. It was really difficult to like overtrain because I would be so tired from work that it's like, you know, I would get home I would drive straight from work. Like when I worked at Amazon, I would, you know, wake up at 6 every morning, make breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at the same time. And then, you know, go work a 10-hour shift. And then as I would drive from
post
Amazon,
some ridiculous shit on Instagram.
I would post the most ridiculous item I saw that day while driving.
Of course.
And eating dinner. So I would like drive straight from Amazon to the gym while eating dinner, while driving, because I didn't have time any other time. I would go in and I'd have an hour and a half depending on how bad traffic was, sometimes less.
Yep.
And I had to leave, I think it was 8:15 was my cutoff. I was like, cool, like, doesn't matter if I didn't even finish warming up. If it was 8:15, I left because I had to go home, get everything prepped for the next day and go to sleep.
Yep.
Like, and that was the only option. So when I went in, like, I cared, like at that time, I feel like I cared more than anyone else that was there because I didn't have another option.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, yeah, I was telling you the other day, like I would, if I didn't have another job on the weekends, like there was a time where I was only working 50 hours a week. So I was working 5/10s, but both Saturday and Sunday, I would nap through the middle of both days.
Right.
Because that was the only way I could catch up and actually keep recovering. And I would take 1 full day off a week. So like my Sundays, it was my Saturdays. Because I had just worked, you know, I just walked 100 miles for work all week.
Right.
I would like wake up, run errands, come back, nap, and then I would just relax all afternoon.
Yep.
And like, that was just something I had to do. It was like, I know I only have 2 days off a week, but like, if I don't dedicate a full day to recovery, I won't be able to get stronger.
Yep.
So to me, it was very easy to get better because it was so simple to set up structure. So now for me, it's quite a bit more difficult. You know, and this is a different type of work. Like it's and the work I do now isn't physical, but it is like I put a different amount of time and a different amount of myself into it for sure.
Yep. Totally.
But yeah, and I mean, like, living
And mental fatigue is real. Like, there have been a lot of studies that look at the way mental fatigue affects your athletic performance. And if I spend 6 hours sitting in front of the computer figuring out administrative bullshit for the business and writing people's training plans that I put a lot of time and energy into, and then I try to go train, my training definitely suffers from that amount of mental fatigue. The good thing about my old job, even though it was physically far more difficult than sitting in front of a computer or standing in front of a computer, is that for a lot of it, I could turn my brain off.
Totally.
And just do what I do, And then I could go to the gym. My body might be a little fatigued, but my brain was ready to go. It's the opposite now. My body is tired from just standing there or just sitting there, and my brain is shot. So it's a whole different set of struggles that I haven't figured out yet.
Yeah. And I feel the exact same. Like, I think honestly one of the easiest things for training for climbing is having a job that, like, yeah, you can kind of just check out mentally of. When I washed windows, I cared about what I was doing and that I was doing a good job, but it's washing windows.
Right. You just listen to podcasts all day.
I listened to 8 hours of podcast a day.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Like, if I wasn't listening to podcasts about training or business or like working with people, like, I was just thinking about rock climbing.
Right.
Like, it was such a singular focus. And so even though I was like working out in the sun and like moving my arms over my head and like carrying 40-foot ladders all day, it didn't matter. Like, everything, like, there was one goal and one purpose. Yeah. And so it's different. And I think the toughest thing for me now is this is just different. Like, I've never known like being able to have this type of schedule, being able to, it's just a large adjustment for me.
Yeah.
But that said, like, I'm the healthiest I've ever been right now, knock on wood. And, I'm really psyched. I think this is going to be a really big year. I'm really excited for it.
Cool.
So we'll see if it'll ever stop raining on the East Coast. Maybe I can get working. I've tied in one day so far this year.
Good luck.
Yeah. I've got some, kind of big sport climbing goals that I'm excited for.
The time is running out on.
Time is always running out, Kris. One day at a time. But yeah, so we'll see. I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a good year, though. I feel like more recently I've started to understand how to strike a better balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't even had a chance to figure out how to strike the balance because I've just had to put my head down and do this thing that I'm doing. So I'm looking forward to when Annalisa is done with school and I can learn another paradigm, learn another way to conduct myself and to plan and to schedule and to communicate. I think that's all part of it. And that word, I know we're getting long here, but I do want to just say a few things about weekend warrioring that I think are hugely important, a couple of points. And one of those is communication. These are the things I think are, and I'm totally just coming up with these off the top of my head, so I'm bound to miss a few, but the things I think are important for you to be a successful weekend warrior are, one, communication. You have to communicate with your partners, be it your training partners, your climbing partners outside, your significant other at home, husband, wife, whatever. Talk to them, let them know how important it is to you, and make sure that they're on the same page as you. If there's kids involved, communicate it with them. I mean, you don't have to confess over your 6-month-old's crib, but if you have a 5-year-old or a young kid, just explain to them that this is something you really are excited about and want to do, and having your back will be massive, toward your motivation. I remember sessioning with Lee Smith in Louisville. We went out to visit. We went to the gym with him. My daughter was there, and this was before Lee had kids. And my daughter, while I was climbing, just said, "Come on, Dad." And when I came down, Lee pulled me aside and was like, "That was so powerful. Like, I just can't understand. I can't wait to have that happen to me, And it's huge. So if you have kids, communicate it with them, that this is an important thing that you really want to do. I know it can seem like I don't want to take time away from my kids. That's the bad thing to do. But it's certainly not a bad thing to show your kids that you can be dedicated to reaching a goal and pushing really hard for that goal. That doesn't mean take 10 years of your, away from your kid. That just means for these couple of months, I'll be present when I'm with you, but I'm also going to be really focused on my rock climbing. And I'll tell you about it. We'll talk about it. I'll show you pictures. But let them know that that's your goal, that you have a goal. I think that's an important thing to do. So communicate. Partners and kids, especially partners. Communicate early in the season, and this takes us into planning. Communicate and plan before the season starts with your partners. If you go to the crag the first day of the season and you're like, "Hey, what are you going to climb on this year?" to your main partners, then you already fucked up. It's already too late. You need to have that shit totally planned out. When I was climbing with Taylor and Sarah a lot,
Team Sailor.
When I was climbing with Team Sailor a lot, we would, at the end of the season, we would plan for the next season. Like, these are the things we want to climb. These are the crags they're at. How do they line up? Are they in the sun early in the day or late in the day? Are they in the shade? Are they going to be a better early in the season route or late in the season route? And we would line everything up so that we knew here are the crags we're going to for the first months of the season. Hopefully we all send, and then we can move on to these crags. If not, we'll double crag it. We all had each other's backs. If you don't have that, you're not going to be successful. If you wait every weekend to find partners, you're not going to be successful. You're going to get really frustrated. You're going to give up 9 times out of 10. I see it over and over and over. You also have to plan outside of just your season. You have to plan with your spouse, with your significant other, with your kids. If you know you're away all this time, plan to spend extra time outside of the season. Plan to do more work on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that you can rest more Thursday, leave early Friday, climb well Saturday. I don't care if that means you're doing 12-hour days on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Do it if it helps you get more rest and be better on the weekend. You have to be obsessive about it, and you have to be selfish. Your time in the gym is your time in the gym. That's also time away from your significant other, time away from your kids. Don't let some random person who wants to just chat your ear off ruin that. Don't let them make that keep going longer, because they're taking time away from your significant other, from your kids, and from you. And obviously you have to weigh whether that's worth it or not. 9 times out of 10, for me, not worth it. I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to be respectful about it nowadays. I used to not be respectful about it, but now I will. I'll say hello, I'll chat for a second, and then I'm like, hey, I got to get to this. My time is really limited right now. I got to be out of here in an hour. So, and usually people are like, oh yeah, do it. Sorry, you know? So for me, those are the big key components to being a successful weekend warrior. It has zero to do with what hangboard protocol you're using. It has zero to do with whether you're using kettlebells or a barbell, or if you're overhead pressing, or if you're on a keto diet or a paleo diet. It has everything to do with whether you can get your ass to the crag when it matters and be ready to try. So, yeah, that's my spiel. It sounded pretty fucking good. I'm going to just make a transcript of that and sell it as a book.
Perfect. Power book.
Add power to everything.
All right, I've got one last question, then we'll wrap up.
All right.
So, we've talked a lot about before.
Donuts.
Nailed it. We've talked a lot about before, or a lot before, about if you could build a perfect climber using other climbers' attributes, or if you could take other climbers' attributes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's say I was like, oh, I want Rustam Galmanov's finger strength, or Jan Hoyer's power on slopers, things like that. So if you could build like the perfect climber with any attribute you want, what of your own would you keep above anyone else's?
Oh shit, I didn't think you were going there. I was trying to think of what Sierra Blair Coil has that I would also like to have, but now I don't get to answer it that way. Because frankly, I really would love to have her like dedication to what she does. She's basically got World Cup walls in her house. I think that shit is amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway, what would I keep of my own? I would... God damn it, Nate. I would keep the... Can this sort of be a two-part answer? You're running the show here.
We'll keep it to 2, no more though.
Okay, it's 1, but it has 2 halves. So
I think that is 1.
You're right, it is. I would keep my ability to communicate.
So help me if you say with your partners.
What I need and what I want out of this. I'm not afraid to tell Annalisa, I need to go to the gym this many days. If you want to see me, you're going to have to come to the gym. That's exactly how our relationship started, actually. When she moved to Cincinnati, I said, here's my schedule. I climb on Tuesdays. I have my daughter on Wednesdays. I climb on Thursdays. I go to the Red every other Saturday and Sunday. And every other Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I have my daughter. So that leaves Mondays. Or you can come to the gym and see me a little bit more. You know, once it's comfortable for you to hang out with my daughter, you can do that too. But I was straight up about it because I had these big goals. And that might sound like a total dick move, but I had these goals and I wasn't willing to negotiate on those goals. At least not at that point. There definitely was negotiation later. But because I was straight up about that, about here are my goals, here's what I need to reach my goals, will you support me? I would keep that. And I would keep them. I wouldn't trade the daughter that I have, who is and has been for a lot of years extremely understanding of this obsession with my goals, with my business, with my music. I mean, she's been there through all sorts of ridiculous obsessions. And the same with Annalisa. I think she's been really understanding of it. Part of that is my willingness to communicate. Part of that is their willingness to understand. I don't think you can be successful as a weekend warrior climber, as a small business owner, or as a human if you don't have those things. And I feel bad for the people I see who have all the ability in the world to climb, but don't have those things. So that's what I would keep for sure.
Right on. Cool. I think that's a good place to end this.
I'm going to put that at the end of the book.
It's perfect. Just transcribe it straight in. All right. Anything else you want to finish with?
No. I think that's it. I think I've said everything I need to say, and people are sick of hearing me talk. So.
All right. Well, I think we tied it into a nice, neat little bow. So yeah, you all know where to find us. Keep listening to this podcast. Huge thanks to all our patrons who've been supporting us.
Massive.
And you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram.
It's Facebooks and Instagrams.
Just punch it into your Googler.
They're plural. Punch it into the Googler.
You can find us on Pinterest. I think at this point, I feel like you can find Lana.
Lana's about to take that shit over.
Lana's representation of us on Pinterest.
Taking Pinterest over.
But you won't find us on Twitter.
The Twitter.
You never say that.
Yes, I say it all the time, dude.
Because we don't tweet, we scream like eagles.
It's time to build.